Picture this, you're a 17-year-old Japanese student in 1945, fresh out of high school, drafted into what is believed to be just another war. But you're assigned to the Kamikaze Corps, Japan's suicide pilots, trained to crash their planes straight into enemy ships. Your mission isn't to return, but to die. No pay or pension. And when it's over, your family gets nothing, just a goodbye letter. That's all your life was worth. But Japan wasn't alone in putting a price on its soldiers. Every nation, from the United States to Nazi Germany, did the math. How much a man was worth alive, how much to keep him fighting, and how much to pay when he died. In this episode, we break down the true cost of a soldier in World War II, from paychecks to rations, rifles to funerals, across 5 nations that sent millions to the front. This is the price of a soldier. Japan's kamikazes earned nothing, not a coin, not a meal, not even the promise of return. But what about the soldiers who did get paid? What was the value of obedience measured in dollars, marks, rubles, and yen? In the United States, a private made $50 a month, about $1,000 today. A corporal earned $66, a sergeant $90, a lieutenant $150, and a colonel $333, nearly $6,600 today. If you were killed, your family received up to $10,000 in insurance. The U.S. soldier was one of the most expensive assets of the entire war, trained, supplied, and insured like a machine of flesh and discipline. However, in Nazi Germany, things were a little different. A private earned 35 Reichsmarks, about $14 US, or $280 today. Some earned 1 mark a day for frontline duty, but that barely covered a loaf of bread. A colonel made nearly 1,000 marks, $7,000 today. To Berlin, the message was clear. Foot soldiers were expendable, officers were investments. But it gets worse on the Soviet Union side, because most Soviet soldiers weren't paid in money at all, just bread, soup, and the promise of survival. A lieutenant earned 600 rubles, a colonel 3,000, but inflation turned it into paper dust. For the Red Army, the real currency was blood. Now in the United Kingdom, a private earned 2 shillings a day, about 40 cents US, $12 a month, $250 today. A sergeant made roughly $1 a day, a lieutenant 20 pounds a month, and a colonel 40 pounds. Even in death, the system stayed organized. Widows received pensions, half of it taken back by the government. And finally in Japan, a private earned 9 yen a month, less than $2, around $40 today. A sergeant, 30 yen, a lieutenant, 90, a colonel, 150. Most of it paid in military scrip, currency that became worthless the moment the empire fell. To the Imperial Army, honor replaced salary. Dying for the emperor was the paycheck. 5 nations and 5 different systems to put a price on a man's life, from the American private worth $50 a month to the Soviet conscript who fought for bread. Every army reduced its soldiers to numbers on a ledger. And yet, the paycheck was only the beginning, because behind every coin and ration ticket was a much larger bill. The rifles, the training, the uniforms, and the food that kept them fighting. That is where the real math of war begins. Paychecks told one story. Steel, fuel, and blood told the rest. If war had a price tag, this is what it looked like. First, let's take a look at the small arms. The rifle, the cheapest weapon and the most common on the battlefield. In the United States, the M1 Garand cost $85 to make, about $1,900 today. For the Germans, the Kar 98K came in around 70 Reichsmarks, roughly 28 US dollars. In the United Kingdom, the Lee Enfield rifle ran near 12 pounds per unit. And in Japan, the Arisaka rifle cost about 90 yen, less than $20. Cheap tools by themselves, but multiplied across millions of men. Rifles alone cost nations hundreds of millions of dollars. Every bullet fired was another bill added to the ledger. Now let's take a look at the big boys, the artillery and heavy weapons. Firepower with a bigger price. In the United States, a 105mm howitzer cost around $25,000. In Germany, the iconic 88mm flat gun, anti-air, anti-tank, and terrifying, reached nearly $30,000. For the Soviets, the The ZIS-3 field gun was the bargain of war, about $4,000, mass-produced by the thousands. But no weapon was ever paid for once. Each needed mountains of shells, spare parts, and fuel to move it. The true cost of a cannon wasn't in the metal, it was in keeping it alive. Speaking of metal and fuels, how about the tanks and armored vehicles? For the United States, a Sherman tank cost between $44,000 and $64,000, close to $1 million today. In Germany, a Panzer IV averaged $50,000. The newer Panther climbed to $120,000, and the massive Tiger I hit $300,000. The cost of 4 Shermans for one tank. On Soviet Union side, the T-34 was cheap and fast. Early versions cost 270,000 rubles, later cut in half to 135,000, roughly 30 to 40,000 US dollars. The Germans built quality, the Soviets built quantity, and both paid in blood, fuel, and steel. Armor turned battlefields into factories of destruction. Every tank burned oil by the barrel, shells by the minute, and lives by the hour. They weren't just machines, they were mobile bank accounts that exploded. In the air, war became even more expensive. In the United States, a P-51 Mustang fighter cost about $50,000, over $1.2 million today. A B-17 Flying Fortress bomber, nearly $240,000, about $5 million now. Training a single pilot could cost $30,000 before he ever touched enemy skies. For the UK, the legendary Spitfire cost around 13,000 pounds, about $700,000 today. Fuel, ammunition, and maintenance drained Britain's wartime budget faster than bombs fell over London. For the Nazis in Germany, a Messerschmitt Bf 109 cost roughly 60,000 Reichsmarks, close to $250,000 today. Luftwaffe pilots were trained fast, but each lost ace meant months of fuel and years of skill gone in seconds. In Japan, the Mitsubishi Zero was cheaper, around 100,000 yen, roughly $25,000 then, but by 1944, Japan was running out of fuel and metal. Every kamikaze mission cost them not just a plane, but a young life they could never replace. And the Soviets had the Yak-9, cost about 130,000 rubles, around $40,000. Crude, rugged, and rushed off factory lines. Yet even the Soviets paid dearly in the resources to keep their skies filled with steel. When a bomber formation went down, it wasn't just men lost, it was millions in machinery, fuel, and dreams turned to fire. Food sounds cheap until you multiply it. In the United States, feeding one soldier cost about $1 a day or $30 a month. With 16 million Americans in uniform, that was over $500 million a month just on food. Add uniforms, boots, medicine, transport, and ammunition, and each soldier became a walking investment worth more than a car back home. Behind every rifle stood trains, ships, trucks, and millions of workers keeping it all moving. For the United Kingdom, rationing became a way of life. From tea to butter, everything was limited. Feeding and supplying the British Army cost millions each month, while merchant ships risked being sunk by U-boats just to deliver food across the Atlantic. Every biscuit, every bullet had to survive the sea to reach the front. For the Nazis in Germany, the Wehrmacht marched on black bread, canned meat, and potatoes. As the war dragged on, shortages grew worse. Fuel convoys were bombed, and winter uniforms never reached the Eastern Front. German logistics began to starve long before the soldiers did. In Japan, isolation from Allied blockades pushed the empire to desperation. Soldiers often survived on rice and whatever they could forage or seize from conquered lands. By 1945, starvation claimed more Japanese troops than enemy bullets ever could. And the Soviets, they fought hunger as fiercely as the enemy. The Red Army supply lines stretched across frozen wastelands. Soldiers received bread, soup, and sometimes vodka for warmth. Soviet factories ran non-stop to clothe and arm millions, while railroads carried everything from tanks to potatoes through snow, fire, and chaos. Add it all together, rifles, tanks, planes, and rations. The cost of keeping one man in the fight reached $10,000 to $20,000 in 1940s money, but hundreds of thousands per soldier today. Wars aren't won by courage alone. They're bought one bullet and one body at a time, and this was only the down payment. When the guns stopped, the spending didn't. Every fallen soldier came with a bill. The war may have ended in 1945, but the cost of peace had only begun. In the United States, even death had an invoice. Each burial cost between $75 and $100, casket, transport, and ceremony around $2,000 today. By 1947, more than 280,000 American soldiers were reburied in national cemeteries, each one cataloged, shipped home, and laid to rest beneath a folded flag. In Germany, there were too many bodies to count. Most soldiers were buried in mass graves, unmarked and forgotten. After the war, the Volksbund, Germany's war graves organization, recovered more than 3 million remains, rebuilding cemeteries across Europe in an effort to restore dignity, one grave at a time. For the Soviet Union, there were no ceremonies, no marble crosses. The Red Army rarely buried its dead. Bodies were left in frozen fields or consumed by shell fire. For most Soviet soldiers, the cost of burial was zero. Not because it was free, but because the state never paid. In the United Kingdom, the fallen were honored across the world. The Commonwealth War Graves Commission maintained cemeteries in over 150 countries, spending millions of pounds to ensure every soldier, no matter how far from home, was given the same white stone. And in Japan, death left only silence. Many families never saw their sons again. Cremations were rushed, ashes often lost, and instead of a body, families received ihai, wooden spirit tablets to honor the soul. For Japan, even death became another form of debt. After the burials came the bureaucracy, the payouts, the promises, the debts. Paperwork replaced uniforms, files replaced faces, and the cost of war shifted from battlefields to government ledgers. In the United States, war widows received about $50 a month, roughly $1,000 today. By 1946, Washington was spending more than $4 billion a year on veterans' benefits. It wasn't just relief, it became the foundation of America's new middle class. Education, housing, and healthcare that all grew from the promise to take care of those who served. In Germany, promises died with the Reich. Under the Nazis, widows were promised Ehrenrente, honor pensions for the families of the fallen. But after 1945, most never saw a single mark. West Germany would later rebuild the system under Kriegsaufversorgung, a modest compensation program that barely kept survivors alive. For the Soviet Union, pensions existed only on paper. Families were promised 50 to 100 rubles a month, but inflation erased their meaning. The state replaced money with medals, ceremonies, and propaganda. Pride was cheaper than payment. In the United Kingdom, widows received between 35 and 40 shillings a week, about $180 today. Half of it could be taxed if they worked. Britain poured more than 80 million pounds a year into veterans support, but with rationing and shortages, most of it vanished into survival. And in Japan, the empire's promises were the smallest of all. Families of kamikaze pilots received token payments, often less than 1,000 yen, under $200 today. Their true compensation was a letter signed by the emperor, thanking them for a sacrifice that could never be repaid. When the last bullet was fired, the world began counting its receipts. The war was over, but the bill had just come due. In the United States, the national debt exploded from $49 billion to $259 billion. But America did what few could. It turned war into wealth. Its factories never stopped, shifting from tanks to cars, from bombs to washing machines. Out of blood and rubble, the post-war boom was born. Germany was left in ashes. By 1945, its economy had collapsed. Its cities were ruins, and its currency was worthless. Reparations and occupation stripped what little remained. Recovery would come only through the Marshall Plan, a lifeline from former enemies that rebuilt the very nation that once tried to destroy them. For the Soviet Union, no number could measure the loss. 27 million people dead, nearly 15% of its population. Thousands of towns erased. The cost wasn't just in rubles, it was in generations. In the United Kingdom, victory came with a price tag that lingered for decades. Britain owed the United States $4.3 billion, a debt that wouldn't be fully paid until December 29, 2006. It took 61 years to pay for victory, and in Japan, bankruptcy became rebirth. The empire lay in ruins in 1945, but by 1960, it had risen into an industrial powerhouse. From ashes to neon skylines, Japan proved that even debt could be reborn. When the dust settled, every nation paid in its own way, in money, in memory, and in the lives that could never be replaced. When the soldiers died, the money didn't. It changed hands, from treasuries to families, from governments to graves. And long after the parades and speeches faded, the bills still came due. Wars aren't just fought on battlefields. They're fought in budgets, in promises, and in memories. Some debts are paid in cash, others are paid in silence. The war ended in 1945, but the price of a soldier is still being paid. War, power, crime. Different battles, same story. Every empire, every cartel, and every nation leaves a trail of ambition, blood, and consequence. From the deserts of war to the streets ruled by fear, power always has a price. At Nexus, we connect those stories, the generals and gangsters, the governments and ghosts, because history isn't just written in textbooks, it's still being written right now. If you want to understand how the world really works, who controls it, who fights it, and who pays for it, you're in the right place. Subscribe to Nexus, and don't just watch history, expose it.